Welcome back to the Nuggets of Gold podcast and YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be talking about Dre Greenlaw. He has gone out. I believe he's going to be out about 6 to 8 weeks. He's having a surgery. It's like a core muscle surgery. We've seen a lot of guys have that in the past. I think the biggest person that had it a few years ago was J.J. Watt had it, I want to say, and it ended his season, and he was having a great year. So, seems like we are going to see Dre Greenlaw back, but the linebacking core is going to need to step up. So my question today for you, Aiden, is who's going to fill that void? Who's going to be the guy that steps up, plays either the will linebacker spot, or maybe someone moves to the will linebacker spot and someone has to come in and play the Sam spot? But who do you think is going to replace Dre Greenlaw at linebacker, and how much are they going to miss Dre?
I think it's definitely like an injury that's going to hurt. He is a fantastic player and a guy that I think is a part of the Niners' future for the next 5-10 years. But the guy that's gonna step up is a dude who played really, really well versus the Lions. Azeez al-shaair is gonna move into that every down role. But the player that I want to focus on, at least this week, is Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles. The Eagles run a lot of two tight end sets, which means all three linebackers are going to be on the field relatively often. And with Greenlaw going down, Flannigan-Fowles is going to get snaps that he normally would not get. So Azeez has been on the field. He was the kind of that third linebacker last year. Played really, really well versus the Lions. Not super worried about him. He'll step into a bigger role. And I think next to Fred Warner, your job isn't going to be all that hard because he's so dang good. But really interested to see how DFF plays. And worst case, you bring in a guy like Marcel Harris to spell him. That's why you kept that guy on the roster. But I think it'll be really interesting, especially this week when you're going to get challenged with these two tight end sets with Ertz and Goddard. So I think it'll be really, really interesting.
Yeah, so there's going to be 3 guys, I think, that will definitely get playing time. The guys you mentioned. Azeez looked really good in preseason. He was flying all over the field against Detroit, so I would expect that he will probably have the largest snap increase. But in terms of who's going to be like a true will linebacker, I think the best guy suited for that is probably Marcel Harris. We've seen Marcel Harris have a lot of reps in the NFL. I think the biggest game he had was against the Ravens. He had the game in 2019 against the Saints where he was getting cooked. And I think what we learned is he's a very good football player, but I don't know if you want him on the back end. Like he's not fast enough, I think, to play safety. The 49ers felt that way as well. That's why they moved him to will linebacker this year. I think he could be a great will linebacker. So I think we're going to see a lot more of him. I do think we could see DFF a little bit more. However, I think the guy that's probably going to take like the largest increase and have the biggest role with Dre Greenlaw out is going to be Azeez, because Azeez looked fantastic. He's played the most, and honestly, this week he might have this might be the biggest game of his life, just in terms of his role, how much opportunity is there. He could potentially kind of become that will linebacker for the next 6 to 8 weeks, and he could potentially show like, hey, I'm a really good piece. I'm a really good piece. You need to lock me up. Also, needs to be addressed. This dude, when he came out, was kind of all over the place, struggled a lot. The 49ers stuck with him. He has had tremendous development. So I think he's a guy that DeMeco Ryans really likes. But especially this Eagles game, this might be the biggest game of his career because they're going to ask him to do a lot. He's going to have to help with Jalen Hurts a ton. Miles Sanders is going to, they run the football a lot. Another thing that is a big factor is they throw really short passes to their receivers. Like their air yards last week were like 3 air yards at an average throw. So they were not pushing the ball downfield very much. Now there was a couple times where they did, but for the most part, everything's around the line of scrimmage. So you're going to see linebackers in more. You're going to see more 3 linebacker sets, I believe. But these guys, Fred's going to have a huge game. Azeez is going to have a huge game. When Marcel Harris and DFF are in, they're going to have to play really well because these guys are really shifty. Rager's a very athletic, fast player. Devontae Smith, they're going to have their hands full with Devontae Smith. And if they start throwing him screen routes and stuff, they have to make sure they bring him to the ground. So this is going to be a big game for these guys. This is a huge game for the linebackers. So I think that this is probably the biggest game of Azeez's life. And potentially Marcel Harris could kind of be in that mold as well. I know, but I do know he's started, so it's hard to really say that because he's not going to be a true starter. But they have a ton of responsibility. So this linebacking core has to really step up. They moved Jonas Griffith to the Broncos. Now he's not in that mix. So they got to show like, hey, we kept the right guys. These guys are ready to go because a lot of the defensive success on Sunday is going to be predicated on how good this linebacking core is. But I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you think that this is Azeez's biggest game of his career?
It's definitely up there. I mean, he was a smaller school guy. I think he was injured through the draft process, which is why he felt a little bit. Obviously, super duper talented. Um, but I'm really interested to see how this week goes. I think it's a stiffer test than what the Lions would have been last week. And he basically like he played I think 72 snaps last week, which are starter level snaps out of the 90 total. I think Fred played 77, Azeez played 72. So he was out there for the majority of the game. But I think that you bring up a really good point. Marcel Harris has a lot more experience in that pass defensive role. But I think Flannigan-Fowles will take. He's the guy who stepped in when Greenlaw went down last week. And I think he's the guy who I think everything with the Eagles and really most NFL teams starts with stopping the run. And he's a better run defender. So super excited to see how it goes this week. But I like that you got some versatility. I think you could even throw Hufanga down there and he could play some outside linebacker. So I'm not super worried about stalling the 6 to 8 weeks. I think both of us are still a lot more worried about corner, which is obviously still a point of contention. But it'll be interesting. But I think this is a good time for Greenlaw to go down, and like I think we could weather this storm a little bit better than the Verrett one.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's almost a linebacker by committee type deal because you brought up Hufanga. Another guy you might see, maybe not in like a true linebacker role, but replacing that linebacker is Samson Ebukam because, I mean, he is pedal to the floor. He is a big-time hustle player. We saw him flashing already in his first week. So see him in there kind of, the guy that's going to make those, just wreak havoc and make those big open field tackles. I think that Hufanga could definitely be in there. Also, you brought up like, you think Flannigan-Fowles could be the guy more this week. Makes perfect sense because if you're going up against a team that maybe that linebacker has to have a little bit more coverage responsibility, then you go to Marcel Harris, who, like I said, you don't really like him as a safety in coverage, but if he's playing linebacker, he's a little bit better in space than some of these other guys. So I do think that you could see him in that role a little bit more, but tons of versatility, and I really think it's just going to depend on the matchup, and I don't think it's going to be like a true Mike and Will. Like there's going to be, of course, Fred's going to be there in the Mike, but this Will linebacker spot, this Sam linebacker spot is going to be just moving all around, I think. So it'll be really cool to see how they utilize it early on. Another thing is when Greenlaw comes back, you have guys that are able to step up if needed. Like you have guys that have had experience early on in the season. So if you're going to have injuries, you're going to you'd rather have them early on in the year. We saw that in 2019 with the Niners. That's when a lot of their injuries took place and they ended up getting healthy right before the playoff run. So got to hope that's the case. Jason Verrett, obviously very concerning. We are going to be talking about that cornerback 2 spot tomorrow. But I think that's going to do it for today's episode. So thank you all for listening. And we'll talk to you about who's going to be this cornerback 2 with, seems like Emmanuel Mosley is going to be out. So got a huge responsibility covering Devontae Smith, and we don't really know who that is. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow. But thank you all for listening, and we will see you very soon.